What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now Back to the Past. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about Firewatch for its 7-year anniversary. I don't think this game is a totally unnoticed game. There was a really big, I'd say, movement or push on YouTube. Lots of theory videos. Actually, one of them connects to me that I'll tell the story of later. But there was a lot of talk online about this game. There was also a lot of talk specifically about the ending, some controversy. Now, I'm going to try to not spoil it because it's only like a 3-hour game. It's $20. It sometimes goes on sale for $5. It really only fluctuates between two prices over the last 7 years. If maybe you're interested after I start to talk about it, maybe you buy it. I don't want to ruin the ending for as anticlimactic or maybe not as you think it is, right? I want people to kind of experience it on their own. But that was a big thing. So I do want to talk about that subject in general because my opinions have, in fact, shifted of how I view this game, specifically the ending, probably not the whole rest of the game. So let's talk a little bit about this, right? This is a game made from a super small studio. I want to say like 12 people made this game. I'm kind of a sucker for these things. I think to like Giant Sparrow, who made What Remains of Edith Finch and The Unfinished Swan, right? Probably one of the most talented teams I'd say on planet Earth. And I really love Giant Sparrow. So maybe I just have a thing for like teams under 15 members. But I think they honestly did a really, really good job. It's not without faults. There's definitely issues with this game. I would say the biggest issue is how it runs. I don't know if I felt that back then. Maybe the ending took me away so much from, how the game literally ran on the PlayStation 4. But I'll tell you, playing it again 7 years later, and that's literally what it's been, is actually kind of nuts. I never played it in between that. The game does not run well, literally at all. So that would be, honestly, maybe my only problem. I like the art style. I like the visuals. It's scenic. There's a little bit of isolation there. It's really cool. There's a really cool environment that they let you kind of go around with. It's limited, right? That's a big thing with this game. We'll talk about how this game works, but it's a limited environment. But I think, honestly, it looks really good. It's just how it runs. There's a lot of stuttering. There's a lot of things that pop in. It's actually pretty bad, and I don't know if I thought about that, back 7 years ago. Again, maybe because of the ending. So, game released, and why it's such a big deal to me even, well, two things. Number one, again, I'm a sucker for these kind of games, and I did overall really, really like the game even 7 years ago. But it was also the very first video on the main channel on Podcast Now that, blew up. Now, blew up, meaning I think it's at, 29,000 views. I would consider it blowing up because if, every other video you do gets, 20 views, and then all of a sudden one gets 29,000, that's obviously a big deal at the time. And so, that was the first thing. And it was also talking about a theory regarding the ending, I guess more or less regarding one of the main characters in Delilah. Okay, so we're going to get back to that as well. So let's go through this game. All right, you start the game off, and it's just a lot of reading and prompts. You just press, which choice you want to do. This game is a choice-based game. Now, it all leads to the same kind of thing, right? But you get a little bit of variation in how you answer questions. In the beginning, it's answering really about your life, about growing up. Do you get a dog, or what kind of dog, I should say, specifically do you get? There's a really big choice with your wife at the very end of this conversation, or choices that you're able to do. And honestly, I will say, the beginning of this game is phenomenal. I guess I'm also a sucker for just literally reading words on the screen. There's really no visuals that go along with it. There's a couple background noises, right? I think when you pick the dog, maybe there's barking behind you, but you're not seeing these things play out. But your wife gets sick, let's say. She has a pretty severe, thing, and your life starts to kind of fall apart, starts to break apart, and it really hit me. I mean, 7 years ago, I wasn't married. I didn't have my wife. And so maybe now, different point in my life, maybe it hits me harder where it's like, man, if that happened to me, what would it be like? I honestly think that happened, when reading it. So I think the beginning is incredibly powerful. I think it's incredibly emotional. And it does it just literally with words. It doesn't even have to use any kind of visuals. And then the game begins. And you play as Henry, right? That's the main character. And then Delilah. And Delilah is kind of your supervisor. She's talking to you. And you really, at the beginning of the game, you really don't care. And a big strength of this game, I would say, is these two characters. In fact, let me say this. The entire game, I would heavily argue, would completely fall apart and not even be a game, would be absolute garbage if these two characters didn't work. you got to believe, number one, that they're real. And Henry comes across, I would say actually for a good amount of the game, very monotone. He kind of doesn't care. He talks like this. He's like, yeah, I'll go do it. Like, he doesn't have a lot of spunk to him, but it's kind of because of his personality. It's because why is he actually there? Well, you find out, why he's actually there. He's getting away from problems. He's trying to escape with a job that's so isolated where all he's supposed to do or all he thinks he's going to do is sit in a tower and look for if a fire starts and then report it in. Like, that's the job for, I think, like 75, 80 days. And it's a way to escape. It's a way to get away from his kind of broken life. And so he's not going to come at it with a lot of spunk and a lot of enthusiasm, right? And I love it. I mean, I think it plays really well. And then honestly, on the flip side, you have Delilah, who's a little bit more kind of lax, right? She's a little bit, she immediately starts to joke with you on your first day. Now, you find out she was like a little drunk at the time, but like she's more talkative. She wants to talk. She wants to kind of get to know you. She's honestly, in a lot of ways, the opposite of Henry, and it works. Okay, so these two characters voice acted beautifully, and it helps because first-person game, the entire game's idea is you really don't see anybody's faces, right? Pictures and stuff, but it's all carried out through voices. It's just the voice. And that's, I would say it's pretty difficult, but I would say they absolutely nailed it. So what do you do in this game? Well, you talk a lot. You listen to words. You pick what decision you're going to say back to Delilah. And that's kind of like the majority of the game. Now, the rest of the game, you go out and you kind of go from point A to point B, find something, pick something up, read something, advance the story. Honestly, this is a talkative game, and the majority of this game is just the voices, just the story, just what's going on. Now, there is a pretty, I would say, unique and different kind of style of getting around. They rely solely on a map and a compass, right? So you got to know your directions, you got to know which way you're going, and I said it earlier, the game's a little limited, right? The world is nice, but it's also limited. In some ways, that's good. In some ways, it's bad. The good is you can get pretty easily lost here. Now, I'm not the greatest when it comes to like puzzles and stuff like that, and I would assume in a game like this, I'd probably get lost more than the average person. I remember 7 years ago, I would get so frustrated. I got lost so much. In this time, a little bit older, I honestly was not stuck nearly as much. It's actually why I was able to beat the game in like 3 hours. I think if you get stuck, it's 3.5. If the game's longer than 3 hours to you, it's most likely because you got lost somewhere. I would just wager that bet. And that's okay. I honestly think that's kind of the point. If you think about it, because it's like, well, Henry has never done this stuff before, and he's got a compass and a map, and they give you like clues, and they tell you at the top, okay, here's where you're going to go, and then you look at the map, and there's a lot of words on the map, so you're able to see landmarks, and they want you to go north of the creek, and there's lines, and sometimes those circle objectives on the map. Like, there is stuff there. In the limitation department of the map, there's only a couple ways to get to certain areas, right? Now, sometimes there's like maybe 2 or 3 ways to get to a general area, but then it's kind of one. There's some spots in this game where there's one way or nothing. Like, there's only one way through. And if you can't find that way, or you think, well, maybe the game will let me do something else. This is not a parkouring game. This is not a game that lets you kind of like jump over, shimmy over a rock, and then kind of like scoot over. This game is very specific. It wants you to go in a certain area, and if you think you can go kind of like a detour route because maybe you can't find the one they want you to find, sorry. So I think in some ways that's good, some ways it's bad, but honestly that's what you're going to be doing for most of the game, is talking, listening, and then walking around from point A to point B. Now, as the game goes on, a bigger mystery kind of starts to evolve. Now, this is where I'm going to try to start to avoid spoiler things, right? Up until now, we've kind of talked about it because there's stuff that starts to happen. A lot of this game is kind of based off of, let's say, paranoia. Is things as bad or are things as crazy as they seem, or are they driven kind of out of the excitement of Henry and Delilah? Do they kind of want things to be crazy? Do you know what I mean? And without spoiling it, I'd say that's probably as far as you can go. Some stuff starts to happen, and it's up to us as the player, and the game will answer these questions, but it's up to us as a player to decide, are we making it worse kind of on our own? Like, is it our mind that's doing this, or is it actually, happening? And I will say this, the way the game ends, I guess back in the day, disappointed a lot of people. This is where, the YouTube side and kind of the social media side comes into play. This was a very highly talked about game. And you can look back at those videos, and I think there's a lot of quality content. I beat the game, for a second time, a few days ago to prepare for the video, and then I went back and I just watched a couple 1.5 million viewed videos from 7 years ago talking about different theories. They're all extremely good. There's theories about Delilah. I did a theory video about Delilah back in the day. I like it. And a lot of that stems from people's either confusion. There's more to it than you think there is. There's that idea specifically with the character of Delilah. And then also kind of talking specifically about that ending. So I will say, again, without getting into spoilers, the ending back in the day, I hated it. I was like, that's the ending. There's got to be something I'm missing about it. I will say now, looking, I guess, back 7 years ago, but also looking back at the ending of this game, I get it. I really do get it. I actually would say I land in a pretty unique spot, and it's all, it's one of these situations where it's like, if you know, you got to beat the game first. But I land in a unique spot where I understand what they were doing with the ending, and so there's an element of that you kind of, if you know, you know. But I also actually think there was more to it than meets the eye. I'm actually not sold that everything was exactly how it seemed, that Delilah is the person that you think she is. I think there's specifically more there. So it's kind of an odd place, I would say, to be. I don't even know if it's like acceptable to the Firewatch community to be able to live in both worlds, because like I kind of believe there was more going on, but I also get the ending, which, again, I can't really go into. It's that kind of thing. But honestly, it's extremely unique. I think this is one of the most unique, not just like indie games, but I think this is a very unique game just all on its own, because the game just relies so much on its story, so much on its really two characters. Now, there's more, right? We get the story of like Ned and Brian that I won't go into, mystery elements there. There was old rangers that you find notes of kind of in the environment in these cache boxes, so you can do that, and you learn a little bit more about them. There's Henry's wife as well. So there's a couple characters. I mean, even with that right there, 7. There's 7 characters, in this entire thing. Maybe there's 2 teenage girls, that kind of starts the game with the first objective that you do. There's not a lot. The game is so heavily focused on Henry and Delilah. And again, their relationship and how they do it, because this game will jump, right? There's a lot of days. I think there's like 76, 77. It's in the mid-70s by the time you leave, by the time the game's over. And they don't make you do all 77 days, let's say. They make you do maybe 7 of them, 8 of them. And honestly, that can kind of get messy, you'd imagine, right? It's really any situation where if you have 2 characters that start out not liking each other, and actually specifically it's Henry not liking Delilah. I think Delilah will talk to anybody. I think Delilah does talk to Henry. So it's really just Henry's refusal to like be talkative, be social, with her. And, when you have that, and then you have all of these days over 2 months, right? And you also have that their relationship is going to grow and it's going to get stronger and they're going to be kind of pulled together more and more. But you're skipping so many days, you got to make the days that you're together count. And honestly, if you think about it, you're only talking to her for like 2.5 hours, let's say. You forget the beginning of the game because that's not the point of it. Maybe the very, very end. You think about how this game plays out. There's only a few hours you're talking to Delilah and going back and forth. And in those 2.5 or so hours, they completely build that relationship where you get how they started as it starts to evolve and then its conclusion. I would say it's pretty powerful for what it is, even though people will have stuff to say about it. So I really think this is a truly unique game. It's nothing special from like a gameplay point of view. The kind of stuttering and constant stops, this game has a lot of it. That may frustrate the living heck out of you. But honestly, I do think this game is worth people's time. I think this is one of the more special games that came out, like the PS4, Xbox One gen. I think it came out PS4 console exclusive first, but I think it's everywhere now. It was on Game Pass, and I think they took it off, so that kind of sucks, right? But you can get this game again $20 or then $5. It only fluctuates between the two anytime time it's on sale, it'll be like $5. I think it's worth it because it's just a different kind of game. And if you guys want to know like my full thoughts on the ending, if you've beaten it and stuff, just let me know in the comments. We can talk about it there. But let me know what you think about Firewatch in general, if you played it back then, or whatever your situation is. Make sure you guys are subscribed, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.